Welcome back live to Daytona International Speedway as we kick off another 7.5 hours of live coverage, taking you to the conclusion of an American sports car classic, the 42nd running of the Rolex 24 at Daytona. The good news is sports car races go on, rain or shine. The bad news is it has been raining here at Daytona for more than 12 hours, and we are currently under a full course caution. We have been for the last 2 hours due to the sheer volume of water here at the racetrack. Here's a look at the standings. Andy Wallace with teammates Tony Stewart and Dale Earnhardt Jr. have led since early yesterday evening, helped in part by these long yellow flags. Terry Borcheller in second, Jimmy Johnson in third, and Wayne Taylor in fourth as Daytona prototypes fill the top 4 positions, covered by just 6 laps. Then Johnny Mollem in the GT class leading Porsche 911 GT3 RS, just 1 lap ahead of the second place car in class, currently handled by young Johannes van Overbeek. Then 2 more Daytona prototypes in 7th and 8th. Dieter Quester and Jörg Bergmeister in a Ferrari and a Porsche, respectively, on the same lap in that battle for the 3rd and final podium spot in the GT category. And not far behind, yet another GT Porsche 911. GT should be a great battle all the way to the finish. Then our SGS, or Super Grand Sport class leader, the 3rd and final class in competition here at the Rolex. Greg Pootmans of Canada driving a Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car. Then the GT car of Tony Burgess, Randy Pobst in the 2nd place SGS Porsche. Scott Dixon driving with Scott Pruitt. That's the pole-sitting Lexus Riley, a brand new car for Chip Ganassi Racing, but they've had their share of problems through the night. They currently run in 15th place, 31 laps off the lead. Then another pair of GT cars and an SGS machine as the classes continue to mix it up here at Daytona. The rain continues to fall fairly lightly now, and as you can see the flags snapping on the infield, there is a chance we could get this track dry if only it would stop raining. Temperature 63 degrees. It'll warm up a little bit. Sunrise expected at 7:14 a.m. Eastern time, but right now I'd say there's very little chance that we'll watch the sunrise over Florida. Here's a look at the current radar. Daytona Beach is at the upper right portion of the screen. The weather moving from the southwest to northeast, and from what that looks like, although I am certainly no meteorologist, I would say there's a chance that this rain might stop, and that would be a very good thing indeed. Welcome to our Speed Channel host position high above Victory Lane. I'm Bob Varsha. 7.5 hours of live coverage coming up. We'll get you up to date on what's been happening during the night. And our top story right now has to be the front-running Daytona prototype being driven by 2 NASCAR Nextel Cup stars and former Rolex winner Andy Wallace. They have been absolutely bulletproof in this, the first anniversary of the introduction of the Daytona prototype class. Now, we had a heavy downpour about 3 a.m. Eastern time that basically flooded several of the corners here at Daytona International Speedway. The yellow flag came out, and it has been out since that time. But the cars have been circulating on track, and of course, the clock continues to tick toward the end of this 24-hour race. I suppose the good news is we may have history in store here at Daytona. The shortest distance covered by a race winner in Rolex 24 history came in 1989, 621 laps, about 2,210 miles by Derek Bell, John Andretti, and the late Bob Wallach in a Porsche 962. We have now completed 416 laps, so a little over 200 laps to get to the record. Hard to say what the weather's going to do, but we'll be following it. And now let's go up high to our announced position above start finish to hear from Lee Diffie and Dorsey Schrader.
Good morning, Bob. Good morning, everyone. Well, I guess it's not the way that we would have liked to have woken up, and first thing you think of is who was out in front and what's been happening while we've been catching a quick nap. But I guess we have to focus on the positive, Dorsey, and we had one heck of a race last night, yesterday afternoon and last night, and this thing is far from over.
That's for sure. These guys want this rain to end because there's actually 3 laps between 1st and 3rd place in the prototype. But all the way through the field, there's racing to be had. But they can't do it because they're behind this pace car. These guys want to get it on and get it on right now.
Well, it's 6:05 local time, 3 hours they've been under caution. And Mark Raffoff, we were speaking with him earlier, and we'll speak with him shortly again. They're hoping to get back to racing as soon as they can if the rain will just ease up a little. Let's get in our first pit report of the day. Here's Calvin Fish.
Well, Lee, visibility has really plagued these drivers and teams since it started to rain here yesterday. One of the major issues was the windshield wiper, getting it to actually touch the screen at speed, and probably the worst affected by that were the Fab Car cars. Really out there, a lot of the teams just struggling to see anything. A lot of drivers coming in and just saying it is an absolute nightmare out there. Now, under caution, these cars really almost turn into a sauna. You're not getting any air over the car. The inside cockpit temperature remains the same, and it just mists up the inside of the windshield. A lot of the teams have been doing windshield changes throughout the night, particularly under caution, trying to find a solution to this major problem. They've been drilling holes in, they've been putting defog, maybe windshield wiper fluid on the screen, just trying to do anything to get that screen clean for these drivers. Now, when we do go back to green, the next issue is going to be tires. A lot of wet weather tires were used throughout the day thus far, and a lot of these tire suppliers, remember we have 3 tire suppliers in this division. We have the Goodyear for the DPs, Dunlops for the GT class, and the Huger tire for the SGS. We understand that 2 of the suppliers may be running into a supply issue. What they were hoping for was a little bit more attrition through this race, where some of the teams could then hand their tires off to some of the other teams. The problem is, running under caution, the cars keep running, so it's a double-edged sword. When we go back to green flag racing, the teams are going to need more wet tires, but until some of them other teams drop out, it's not going to happen. Brian, what's the story down at your end of pit lane?
Well, Galvin, it's abysmal. You know, Mother Nature, when she's not happy, she can be a real... You get the idea anyway, and that's what it is down here. You know, these cars run in the rain, and they've got rain tires, but I want to try to give you an idea why they're under caution right now. You can see on the cameras at home, you can see water on the racetrack, but back here behind pit lane, you can see how deep the water really is. Even though these rain tires have big grooves in them, when they roll through the water, they push it off to the side out of the channels of the rain tires, but there's so much water on the racetrack right now, even though the rain tires do their job and push the water away, there's no place for the water to go, and it leaves this standing water. The car is hydroplaned. The only safe thing to do is keep them behind the pace car and keep the pace down. Hopefully, the rain subsides, the water will drain from the track, and then go back to green flag racing. Bob?
All right, thank you, Brian. Normally, in an event like this, we admire the strength and courage and speed of the racers and their grace, as racer actor Paul Newman likes to say. He and his team have had a very difficult Rolex. Right now, we are admiring their resiliency. We'll be back to Daytona International Speedway.
So early, just a little after 6 here, East Coast time. Let's update you on the Daytona prototype class. They're reasonably spread out, but they do fill the top 4 positions overall. But this is the class standings. Andy Wallace in that Crawford with Chevrolet power behind it for Howard Boss Motorsports, going nicely indeed. Terry Borchella in that car, in the second car, the 54 car, well placed ahead of Jimmy Johnson, and then Wayne Taylor in his debut run in his new team. Certainly not his debut run as far as 24-hour races go. This is his 24th. Mark Goosens, this team has had somewhat of a comeback. Although they're 14 laps down, they are in 7th overall and 5th in class. That's a mighty effort for the Doran Lister organization. And Kelly Collins has just taken over from Court Wagner in the Michael Shank Racing Lexus Doran. Dixon is back in the Ganassi car. They run 7th in class, and some troubles throughout the night puts them some 30 laps down. The reigning SRP2 champion in the BMW Piccio for G&W Motorsports, Steve Marshall, 8th in class. Sadly, Shane Lewis and that car there, the Southern Motorsports BMW Fab car, they were right up there on the verge of breaking into the top 10 around about the 14th hour mark, and they have dropped back, and it's been a tough old day, as you can see there, for Robbie Gordon and Doug Goad and Stefan Gregoire Milcaduno in the Spirit of Daytona prototype, the 09 machine. And tough night too for the Brumos Porsche Fab cars, and the 58 going out very, very early. Back here live at Daytona International Speedway, and still under caution, Bob.
That's right, Lee. 12 cars officially out of the race, and 6 of them are among the 17 Daytona prototypes that started the race. Right now, let's check the varying fortunes of 2 cars that have figured very strongly in the lead in this contest. One of them, of course, is the 01 Lexus powered Riley in the hands of pole sitter Scott Pruitt, who says the only problem is seeing.
We're just having a problem with the windshield wiper. Kind of intermittent, and the windshield starts caking up real bad, so we've been coming in and taking tear-offs. The car's great. I mean, the engine's good, gearbox is good. I mean, it's not running like a top. If we could see, we could rock and roll.
In fact, they were all the way up to 2nd place shortly after midnight when Max Pappas got in the car for 1 lap before problems struck. Overheating due to a plumbing problem.
So I heard we had a leak on the front end. We had water temperature coming up. I was in the car only for one lap and came back in, and we had another problem on the back end of the car, not so sure.
That car went behind the wall for a radiator change. They managed to get back out on the track and are trying to fight their way back up the leaderboard, currently 15th. Very different situation for the Howard Boss Motorsports team. The number 2 car of Andy Wallace, Tony Stewart, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. There's Wallace getting out, Jr. getting in. And for them, too, the problem has been visibility in these horrible conditions.
Everything's great. Just the only problem we've got is visibility is terrible because there's so much rubbish in the air, of course, and oil and grease and water. And it gets on the window and you don't see anything. But other than that, the car's great.
They have held the lead for much of the race. And a particularly good job has been done by the NASCAR stars who don't do a lot of this sort of thing. Oh, Dale Jr. does have a problem.
Give me a lot of problems. It's hurt real bad. I can't tell till can't tell it till I get out. And it's like, damn, you know, but I don't know. I got a wicked way of mashing the gas pedal, and it's giving me some problems.
That's interesting. I've never heard of Dale Earnhardt Jr. having a problem in his stock car, but he has been having problems with his accelerator foot, if you will, in the sports car here at Daytona. Now let's go to Brian Till in the pit lane with more on the 2 car.
Well, Bob, Max Crawford takes care of both the 2 and the 4 car. And Max, we know that the visibility was a problem when these guys were running, but also you guys have to keep track of temperatures because they're not running the cars as hard. How do you keep them warm?
Well, we threw a plastic bag up in the grill. The car started to get very, very cold, and the oil temperature went way, way down, and we started to get a bit concerned about it, so we just threw a plastic bag up in there at the moment, so we're going to have to take it out when we get running hard again.
Well, the temperature of the car is one thing, but you've got some thoroughbreds that are driving that machine. How do you keep those guys revved up in case we do go back green? Because I know they want to go.
Well, with Andy's case, we started talking about the Queen Mother. He didn't appreciate that. But it is a bit hard, too, because they do get... I think he said it was mind-numbingly boring out here at the moment. So, and it is a bit hard, but you just keep chatting to them.
But you got to keep them revved up because you don't know when they can go back green. How much water has to leave the racetrack before you feel like they've got the opportunity to go back to racing?
Well, I think right now, we can run in this rain right now, but I believe the bus stop's quite badly flooded and quite dangerous. You have to remember that the width of the tires, they don't cut through the water, they sit on top of it, so the aquaplanes very easily.
They're not boats, guys, they're race cars. They've got to be able to knock the water out of the way. We saw that a few minutes ago, and right now, they just don't have that opportunity.
Well, let's check in with the story down here at Chip Ganassi Racing. I'm here with Simon Hodgson, team manager. We saw that the car had some troubles last night. Simon, give us the details, if you would.
Yeah, basically the Comp USA Chip Ganassi Racing Lexus Riley was running pretty strong up till about 9 o'clock last night. Heavens then opened. We lost the wiper, sheared a gear on the wiper motor. Carried on until about 1 o'clock. Then what happened then was we lost some tape on the inlet. Temperature started to drop with the engine. Thought, can't get tape to stick, so we changed the nose. 2 laps later, we lost the radiator, pitted, changed the front splitter, the radiator, went out again. Same time, we lost the heat exchanger.
You're loving life, right?
It's a good experience. So took the car behind the wall, fixed the heat exchanger. Unfortunately, went down quite a few laps. All the time we've been battling with windshield that just keeps steaming up. We've cut holes in the door panels. We've tried different different blower motors. We've taken the dash panel out to try and get more air up there. That didn't work. Covered the thing back up. We even took the driver cool hose for his helmet, pointed at the windscreen. That didn't work. We must hold the record for the most screen changes in one race.
I think you need to stick Chip in the other side and have him wipe the screen from the inside. What do you think?
When he wakes up, yeah. Right now, we got about just under 7 hours to go. Still in the hunt. We can still finish, score some good points, not giving up. It's a good experience.
Well, certainly a learning curve for this team. And I think Simon went through that driver's score where he got the sponsor's name in. Scott Pruitt must have been giving him lessons, Lee.
Well, it's good, and something that you get so wrapped up in focusing on this as just the one event, but Simon pointed out a very good point in that it is all about points. This is round 1 of a championship as well as being a marquee event. So they're looking at the big picture as far as their first year in the Rolex series.
I'll tell you one thing real quickly about that heat exchanger you was talking about in the radiator. A heat exchanger is a radiator for the water, and it's an oil cooler for the oil, and they're actually one unit. And what it tries to do is it tries to get the oil temperature and the water temperature to be equal or very near equal. And he lost the radiator first. That was the first problem. Then the heat exchanger broke, and without that, it would do damage to the motor or engine properly.
Throughout yesterday's coverage, we spoke live to Shane Lewis and also Jack Baldwin in the Southern Motorsports Fab car. We're going to see if we can get contact with Shane again. Shane Lewis, hi, it's Lee Diffie in the speed booth here. Can you hear me? No response there from Shane Lewis. We will try again later, though, and try and have a chat with him, because that'll be great to hear what it's like from the driver's perspective out there at the moment. Again, another look at the Porsche keys to this race.
Well, it's all one thing now, isn't it? Weather. Durability is not a problem behind the pace car. Pit stops, of course, either. The weather's just been the whole story. It's never in the history of this event rained this continually, this hard. And that's playing into our whole scenario.
Yeah, and traffic, even if you look back to yesterday, the attrition rate has not been that bad. And that's a credit to the teams and the quality of the cars in the field in this year's race. We can talk more about that when we come back. We're taking you all the way live and exclusive to the finish of this, the 42nd running of the Rolex 24 at Daytona. We're crossing our fingers and hoping the rain eases and we go back to green as soon as we can. Stay with us. You're back with us live here at Daytona International Speedway. Yes, still under caution, and it has been for more than 3 hours now because of this excessive water on the racetrack. Dangerous conditions for the competitors, and we're looking at working our way back toward green flag racing. Let's update you with the GT class standings, and it has been nothing short of a sensational performance from Orbit Racing. Johnny Molan, the Policastros, and everybody in that team, Robin Liddell and Mike Fitzgerald, have been spot on today here in Daytona. Lonnie Pechnik is sitting second for Flying Lizard Racing. He's one of the owners of that team. Dieter Quest, that Ferrari, the Red Bull Ferrari, has performed nicely as well, running in the top three. And what about Kevin Buckler and his men? Never say die. They are not giving up. They have a shot at being on the podium in this race after such a troublesome lead-up. Another one of the Racers Group Porsches with Ian James and Chris Gleason and RJ Valentine in that car, top 5 in their class, and Ian's going very well. We know Ian from Grand Am Cup racing, but this is one of his best drives in that Porsche 4 to be in the top 5. And as we work our way through the remaining class positions, I've got some good news for you that we hear that we are getting very, very close to going back to green flag racing, which is terrific. That's the news, Bob, that we wanted to hear. It's good news, Bob. That's the one that we were waiting for, to hear that we're going back to green shortly.
Absolutely, Lee. While we have a moment, let's take a look at the highlights in the GT class, and a great battle brewing here. The 44 Porsche 911 GT3 RS has pretty much dominated the early lead, with several other cars nipping at its heels. But the problem, as always, is visibility. Scotsman Robin Liddell knows exactly what I'm talking about.
For me, the visibility was atrocious in the second part of my stint. In the first stint, we were going pretty well, and I managed to put the Flying Lizard car another lap down. And then after the safety car, I was right at the back of the pack. And as I was sort of coming through the pack, obviously I was getting a lot of water into the car. And the windscreen just steamed up like I couldn't see anything. It was getting pretty dangerous, so I ended up just sitting behind another car, and I just basically drove to his lights. And I think we were doing like 2 minutes 9, 2 minutes 10, something like that. So I figured it was better to just keep going out there and run as long as possible for the fuel, rather than coming in to get the window demisted. So in the end now, it's not too bad because we're in clear traffic again.
Meanwhile, 2 BMW M3 GTRs from Prototype Technology Group in Virginia were providing the competition for the front-running Porsche. But the problem, as always, was, well, guess what?
Really big problem right now is we lost our windshield wiper. So kind of hard to see sometimes when it's raining hard. You're just driving blind. But other than that, the M3 is great in the rain. We just backed off a little bit. We're just going to kind of run an easier pace through the night and see where we are in the morning. But hopefully the rain will stop a little bit so we can see better.
Well, as it turned out, the BMWs will not see the morning. The number 21 car had early electrical problems. The 22 struck other problems early in the morning.
Bill went out, came back in. We said, okay, we're going to fix the windshield wiper because Bill actually wears glasses and it was even more difficult for him to see. So we fixed it and then we went out, and then somehow we had a belt or pulley failure and the motor overheated. And at that moment we decided not to take any chances. Most likely nothing wrong with the motor turns over, but probably because the temperature, the wings were probably bad and they would have been an inevitable thing. So I think the smart thing to do is to retire, as much as we hate to do that, and look forward to Homestead. It's only 3 weeks to go to Homestead, so we got a lot of work to do. And I guess it's not meant for us to for this year.
Roger Hawley, the team owner of the leading GT car. Roger, you got Johnny Mollum in the car. Not a better guy on this restart, this wet restart. Do you guys have enough rain tires?
We've got the tires, we've got the driver, and we're just praying for a little daylight here.
I don't know, he kind of gave me a grin earlier on the rain tires. It could be poker games already, Calvin.
Well, down here with the Racers Group team and Kevin Buckler, has been quite a day so far. Kevin, give us your thoughts as we go back to Green Flag Racing.
Well, we had a great beginning to the race. We had a blowout, though, midway through my second stint. Had a second blowout after that. We're picking up some debris on the track. Got tagged by the Ferrari in the bus stop, and ever since then, the car's great under wet. The boys have done a great job. The crew's done a great job. We're back in fourth, about to be in third. We'll just keep going. We'll just keep trying.
There's no give up on this team, boys. They're going to try and claw their way back, going for a three-peat in GT.
And as you can see, we are back to green, thankfully, and probably earlier than the majority of us thought we would be, as the prototypes start to work their way past the GT and SGS cars. Andy Wallace leads this race. The top 4 positions still filled by Daytona prototypes, and there's the 27, the Doran Lister, trying to gain more laps back, and they are in the top 10 in 7th position as we ride with the 66, the Racers Group Porsche, with Jörg Bergmeister at the wheel.
These can be some of the hardest laps on the car that can be done, because they've been 2 hours now behind the pace car. Been very, very cold engines, cold gearboxes. Now they got to go back into the song again.
Is it a case of having to wake yourself back up again?
Now the drivers, they've been waiting for this. They heard about 2 laps ago they're going to go green, and they're wanting this. It's also a good time to be aggressive right now, to try to get some positions back if you need to. The bus stop here has been the worst corner for the flooding, and that's where these cars are headed right now once they get off that banking. And the reason for that is the banking drains right down onto the flat, and that's where the bus stop happens to be.
As you can see, our countdown clock, as always, continuing in the top left. Look at the traffic here. Careful, boys, careful. As we get back on our opening lap, stuck right in the middle there is the 73 Red Bull Ferrari. This placed very well in GT class, 3rd in class, in fact. And less than 6 3/4 hours to go, and Andy Wallace has a very comfortable 3-lap bumper at the head of this field, but there's a great scrap going on for second between Jimmy Johnson and Terry Borchella. They're both on the same lap, 419 laps completed. In fact, our race leading car has now completed more than 1,500 miles here at Daytona.
And 3 laps here at this part of the race is nothing at all. I guarantee you that it's unbelievable that we have this low of an attrition with the deplorable conditions we've had to put through so far.
Getting confirmation on that total time for the caution due to the rain was 3 hours 15 minutes in total.
Of course, Bob Barsha alluded at the opening that the slowest or the least laps around here was in 1989. They had to stop that race. I was in it because of a fog delay, so the car sat stationary. Here they've been going behind the pace car for quite a long time.
Well, it's nice to see them back at speed, and I'm sure the drivers are relieved as well, and we can get on with this race. The 42nd Rolex 24. Great to see the G&W Motorsports Piccio still going. Meanwhile, we go on board with the Bell Motorsports Pontiac powered Doran. And the reigning champion, Terry Borchella. You can't help but look at those top 3 cars. Well, actually, let's talk about the top 4 cars, Dorsey, because 3 of those top 4 are brand new cars, the 2 Crawfords and the Riley of SunTrust Racing. And this car, the Bell Motorsports 54, this time last year was not even running. They arrived at the track without the car even turning a wheel. How much can change in 12 months?
I'll tell you what, Jim Bell does a really good job, and these guys have worked awfully hard to get this car up to the speed. It's also, like you said, on 3 laps down to the lead, but on the same lap as second place.
There is the class leading car for GT just ahead of Terry Borchella. The 44 Orbit Racing Porsche with Johnny Molam on board. At this time, we'd like to welcome to the speed announce booth the Director of Competition for the Rolex Sports Car Series, Mark Raffoff. Mark, it's been a long and slow night, or definitely since 3:05.
Yeah, it has, but we're back racing again, so we got a good opportunity, I think, to get this competition going again. Since we've been back on air since 6 o'clock East Coast time, we've been updating the viewers that it was your decision to put the field under caution, just simply too much water out there? Yeah, there's a few spots here, the kind of rain we had where we had some puddling, and we had just a whole ration of guys sliding off the road all over the place, and it was pretty clear they weren't able to race in a number of places on the track, and rather than wreck some equipment and tear everything up, we just thought we'd drive around till we could get rid of it. I think we have.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people at home wonder, well, we got rain tires, why don't you run? But these prototype cars are 1.5 inches off the ground. So if you get a 2-inch puddle on a flat bottom car, what happens is that the tires seems to touch anything, and the chassis becomes like a boat. Of course, there's no rudder on these, so there's not much you can do except ride it out, and that's exactly what was happening.
And hope you don't hit anything, and I think that works even on the GT cars and the SGS cars. You get to a certain speed, if you got that standing water, they just won't stay where you're pointing.
Mark, the guys have already reported from the ground, talking with some of the teams, that there is a bit of a question mark over tyre supply in terms of quantity. What have you heard from Goodyear, particularly for the Daytona prototypes?
Well, I think a lot of the issue is management. I noticed yesterday some guys were running slicks while other guys were running rain tires. I can't really speak for the tire manufacturers as to what they have and who has what left in their arsenal, but that's part of the game, is to use your stuff the best way you can, and I think you'll see some guys have used it well and others are going to maybe struggle a little bit, but I think under the conditions right now, everybody should be pretty good and should be able to race.
Wouldn't be a surprise, though, if they were a little shy on it, though. No one kind of comes here thinking that this weather...
In their defense, you know, to supply these guys and be able to supply them for almost 24 hours with one or the other is almost never happened in my recollection. So I think it's pretty hard to be critical of anybody because it's just never happened. This thing's been under rain for almost everything but the first couple of hours or hour and a half. So the consumption rate's been excessive in that regard because of the conditions we've had to deal with in the last day and a half.
That's what we have heard so far, is on the 2 tire compounds of the rain tire, that the hard compound in these conditions anyway is not what they need. They need the soft, and we've heard early problems during the daylight of blistering those. So obviously it's going to be the team that manages that situation the best.
Correct, and you also in the last 30-40 minutes saw a significant change in the wind, and there's a lot more wind out there, and I think with the drying efforts we did, hopefully we can get it dry, and I think you might see some guys go back to slicks here pretty soon.
Within the top 10, Mark, we've got 6 Daytona prototypes. Of those 6 DP cars, 4 of them are new cars to this series. Have you been surprised at how well these newcomers, hardly newcomers to racing, but newcomers to the Rolex series, have performed straight up?
Not really, because the concept of the car is pretty straightforward, and the people that are executing that concept know how to do it and have done it before, and I'd expect all those guys to be right where they are, as I do the other guys that have been doing it for a while, because of the concept and how easy it is to put those elements together. There's not a whole lot of magic to it. It's just execution and doing a good job, and those guys up at the front have done a good job.
We're just about out of time as far as with speaking to you. We're now going to let you get going again. As we see the GT leading car, it looks like it's missing its rear window. Johnny Molam behind the wheel at the moment. Just very quickly, what's your information line like on the weather? What are they saying? As we see the Racers Group Porsche spin, they get going again. What's the word?
Basically, we're looking at the weather on the radar, and there's a big hole coming, and it's possible we might do pretty good here in the rest of the day, but it's also surrounded on both north and south of us with more weather, and I think it's just a factor of time and where the wind blows and whether we get hit again or whether we can gut slide through this with maybe some overcast and maybe some sprinkles. But right now there's a big hole that's sort of southwest of us, and hopefully that'll slide through and give us an opportunity to get the track dry and see some good racing again.
All right, Mark, thanks for your time. Mark Rapoff, Director of Competition for the Rolex Sports Car Series. He has to get back and oversee this great race as we take another look at race leader Andy Wallace to the tune of 3 laps for the Howard Boss Motorsports Sitco Chevy-powered Crawford. We're going to take a quick break and be back. Guys, he and Michael Levitas and the whole crew have done a wonderful job. The second Doncaster car with the owner's son, Dave Lacey, behind the wheel. A 5-driver lineup in that car. They're both brand new cars for this season and performing well nicely at the moment. 10 laps back, like Dave Lacey, is Charlie Menard. Joe Foster has done a good job. That's for Fox Hill Racing. They spent a long time in the pits not that long ago, and that's held their charge up a little bit. But the great news that we can say about the SGS class is all the cars that have entered are still running. So that's a mighty performance from these guys. Let's get it down to the pits. Brian Till.
Well, John Lacey in charge of mission control here, if you will, for the Doncaster team. Looking good for you guys, but that green really kind of caught you by surprise.
Yeah, we got very little warning that they were going back to green, and obviously we had, you know, pretty tired drivers out there, been driving around for a while, so we had to hustle to get a couple of guys in the car gave us a fresh fuel load and fresh drivers, and we're out there. We got a nice 4-lap lead with the lead car. We're in 3rd place with the other car after being clipped by a prototype during the middle of the night, so that cost us 5 laps. So somebody left their brains in the pits, I think.
Well, it caught them by surprise, the green flag did, but not surprised enough to let the 38 car catch up, Calvin. I know they're working hard to get there.
Absolutely, splitting those 2 Doncaster cars in the TPC racing entry led by Mike Johnson, the crew chief here. And Mike, very difficult conditions certainly. What sort of decisions do you have to make when you're not one of the leading cars, you're one of the class leading cars, you're running under caution like that? How does the strategy play out?
It's actually pretty difficult because anytime a yellow situation comes out, you have to race the leader of the race. It's kind of strange the way it works. If you're actually maybe 100 yards behind the first place car and the leader comes out between you and them, well, when the yellow comes out, it goes to the leader of the race, which will be the Daytona prototype. So the car you're now 100 yards behind gets to go all the way around and comes back behind you. So it's always kind of very difficult. Luckily, we've always run in the 2nd-tier class, so we kind of learn how to deal with it. And you know, everything else, the rain, everything else, it's the same for everybody. And our drivers have been doing a great job. We've had no accidents, all 4 wheels on track, knock on wood. And, you know, I think the 91 car definitely has our number today. And, you know, we're just going to keep going with our race. If they have a mistake, then we'll be right there.
There's certainly one here before the 24-hour in other categories, of course. But, Mike, we talk about it being the 3rd class, but you talk about your driver lineup. You've got Randy Popes in your driver lineup, Andy Lally out there amongst others. I mean, this is a hot class, a lot of great drivers out there this year.
Well, I always rate these races as not as my best drivers, but as my least common denominator. And our support drivers, John Littlechild, Mike Levitas, and Mark Bunting, have done such a superb job in keeping us in it. I mean, you know, Andy and Randy are going to be bulletproof. They're never going to make a mistake. They'll run the fastest lap of the race. But it's the other guys that have really been keeping us in it.
Okay, mate, stay awake and go get him.
Thank you.
There he is, Mike Johnson. We know Mike from, I guess, several places from real world London. Oh, ran a little wide that time.
Little understeer.
Yeah. And of course, Archangel Motorsports. And Mike, very, very busy this week as we see the Corvette. That's the Highlander car. Off to the side, the 24 machine with Pete Halsmer at the wheel.
He's got it turned off. There's no sounds coming out of the car. Yeah.
Is it still running?
Well, he's pulled it off, obviously, out of harm's way. See if maybe he can fix something. That's on the
Pete Halsmer.
My ex-teammate, as a matter of fact. I've driven here at the 24 hours with Pete before. He said, can I get a flat toe, which means he wants to get a rope hooked onto it.
Can I get a flat toe? Can I get a toe?
put on some great performances last year in Grand Am Cup for his Honda of America racing team car.
Can I get a towel?
Great to see him in the main race here at the Rolex 24. Was that you or Willie T that gave him the nickname of Concrete Pete?
Wasn't me.
All the guys trying to squeeze in as much sleep as they can, and it's certainly not easy to do. Stay with us, we'll be back.
Welcome back live to Daytona International Speedway. When the sports cars leave, the NASCAR stockers arrive. Check out our Speed Channel coverage of just about every time a wheel turns here at Daytona International Speedway, beginning Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time live. More than 70 hours of live coverage of Speed Weeks at Daytona 2004. We are back under green here at the 42nd running of the Rolex 24, a race that has been splashed with rain for more than half a day now. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of Saturday here at Daytona International Speedway. Scott Pruitt started Chip Ganassi's 01 Lexus Riley from the pole. Max Angelelli tried to chop down on reigning Daytona prototype champ Terry Borcheller, but he went under both cars and took the early lead. As usual, the race was a sprint from the very beginning, and the contact started early. Just a small coming together there. Mike Borkowski had a very different problem in hour one when the right rear wheel came off his car, stranding him on course. And that would turn out to be a fairly common problem. Angelelli driving hard, got into the lappers early. This is contact with Peter Argetsinger, did right front corner damage. That led to a pit stop, and they fell back out of the lead in the SunTrust car. Craig Stanton on a restart, got into the grass, couldn't get his Porsche slowed down, backed it heavily into the tire wall of the International Horseshoe on the infield. The car was not substantially damaged, though. They got back out. Moving to hour two, the sister car to the 16. Joe Kuntz in the 17 car had a heavy impact with the Armco in the high-speed kink on the infield. That car substantially damaged. Different problem for the reigning overall champions from the Racers Group. A tire went down at the right rear, tossing Kevin Buckler into a wild spin. Very different problem as the front left corner came off on Bill Alderland's BMW. A wheel with a mind of its own. In hour number three, the number 88 Porsche, an all-Portuguese team, Miguel Amaral at the controls, was hit by Didier Taze of the number 27 car and suffered heavy damage. And then it started to rain here at Daytona, and the spins began. Car after car struggling with the limits of adhesion. Meanwhile, Andy Wallace suffered yet another departing wheel. And our investigation showed that virtually every one was a different problem. Dale Earnhardt Jr. did yeoman work in the wet in his first sports car experience in a Daytona prototype. He spun it around once, but that car, as we mentioned, has dominated this race. Robbie Gordon, another NASCAR star, overstepped the bounds of traction in a very damp bus stop chicane. Heavy right rear damage on the 09 machine, the Spirit of Daytona. I'm not sure exactly what Diego Alessi was thinking as he took his Ferrari GT car right into the midst of the traffic in the braking zone for the chicane, but he paid for it, I promise you that. In hour 7, with the light beginning to fade and the rain continuing to fall, the number 2 car continued to dominate. Tony Stewart, the 2002 NASCAR champion, took the controls, said he wasn't sure what was going to happen. All we know is he sliced through traffic and put his car into a solid lead. Meanwhile, the bumping and grinding continued. This is Max Angelelli once again. He, more than either of his teammates, Wayne Taylor and Emmanuel Collard, has had problems with other cars. In hour number 8, Terry Borcheller got into the number 54 car, and in his efforts to get into the lead, he bounced it across the grass in the chicane. Simple over-exuberance. The 88 car got fixed, got back on track, but shortly after that, they had an oil line let go, and the all-Portuguese team finally gave up. J.C. France in the number 59 Brumos Porsche Fab car had his share of spins and then some. A fairly typical problem as the rain fell heavier and heavier. Here are the cars out of the race right now. Daytona prototypes and GT cars in the main. None of the SGS cars, the newest class in Grand American Road Racing Association Rolex sports car activity, out of the race thus far. 53 cars in all started the race. 13 now officially out. Let's go to Brian Till.
Well, Bob, the battle in GT class rages on too between the 74 and the 44. Now the Flying Lizard team with the 74 car approached Daytona with a pretty unique concept. They brought two cars. They brought both a Porsche GT3 Cup car and a Porsche GT3 RS car, and the basic differences between those cars are the track. They went with the Cup car. They left the GT3 RS in the garage and decided to run the GT3 Cup car. It has the same horsepower, the same fuel, but it runs a narrower track and therefore a narrower body section. It cuts a smaller hole through the air, and they feel like they get better top speed. It's just the majority of this racetrack is down these long straightaways. They want that top speed. The 44 has been having trouble with the rear window in that car. It's collapsed in. They'll have to remove the pieces on the next stop. They will not replace that window, but what that does, it tumbles air down the back of that Porsche and gives it dirty air across the rear wing. They will lose downforce in the rear end of that car. They would prefer to keep the rain here so the speeds stay down and downforce is not that big of an issue. Bob?
Well, suppose this happens, Brian. What if it helps them keep that windshield free of fog? Pretty soon everyone will be taking the rear windows out of their cars. GT class looks like it may be the battle of the race all the way to the checkered flag, but we have a long, long way to go. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the 42nd running of the Rolex 24-hour here at Daytona. The number 2 car continues to lead and standing by. We got him up early this morning, Dale Jr. Dale, you had a great start to this race, but now the pressure is on. We're starting to see daylight maybe come up shortly, and we're looking towards the end of this race. A lot of pressure for you getting behind the wheel in these wet conditions. Do you feel additional pressure now that the car is in the lead?
Well, I don't know, it was pretty bad in the middle of the night. We were out on the track. Visibility was 0, and the conditions, the track conditions were just terrible. And so I don't think it can get any worse than that. But you start to feel the pressure of the race, the end of the race coming closer and closer. And but you just gotta train yourself to keep going out there and doing the same thing you've been doing all night long and the whole time. So if we don't have any mechanical failures, I feel pretty confident right now.
Talk about the issues you're having with your right leg when you jump out of the car. I know you say you don't feel it so much in the car. When you get out, what are you feeling?
Just a lot of pain. I don't know why. It must be vibrating to get something in the car or something in the seat or something like that, but it just hurts real bad. But this is probably going to be my last stint, so I think I can handle it. So we'll just we'll go out there and try to bring the car back in the same shape we took off with it. So that's what we've been doing.
These 24 hours always seem a good idea when you're sitting back watching TV in December, but when you're out here in reality and you have to get up early in the middle of the night, you happy with that decision now?
Yeah, you agree to do these things, and I'm really proud to be driving for the Crawfords and Howard Boss, but you ask yourself leading up to the race what I get myself into, but I'll tell you what, it's hard to beat anything as far as fun and commitment and a true team aspect. The relationships and the camaraderie that you make while you're here is awesome. I mean, I can't compare it to anything else. It's a lot of fun and a pleasure to be here. I look forward to doing this more often.
I know that Borisette has been working with you on your road racing skills. Coming here with Andy Wallace, certainly got Tony in the car as well. As you said, he's a natural. Do you think this will translate over to the Cup car when you do the road courses later in the season?
Yeah, when I ran the 24 hours before, a couple years ago, it helped me tremendously. Being around people like Andy Pilgrim and Boris and Ron Fellows and now Andy Wallace, to meet all these guys and learn their different philosophies, and you learn something new every lap and every conversation. And of course it's going to help, if not anything, confidence. And confidence has got to be worth 2 tenths, right?
Absolutely. Well, good luck, mate, the rest of the way. Get that stint in and then get some rest.
Thank you very much.
Well, stick with us. There's a lot of action here. We're going to see Dale Jr. get back behind the wheel. I'm sure there's a lot of NASCAR fans out in the crowd hoping he can pull this one out this afternoon.
This will sound really corny, but to me, when you make the morning, when you see the sunrise come up, to me, that's the big thrill.
When the sun comes up is the moment where you actually really realize where you stand in the race. And if it's time to really push hard, or if it's time to keep a little bit in the car for later on. And it's a very special moment.
The very early hours of the morning from, say, 4 to 7 or 8 is really tough on the body.
The night goes on so long here that, you know, every time you come out of NASCAR turn 2, you're looking at the east banking, looking for any signs of sunlight, you know, just because that means you're getting closer to home.
During nighttime, you're there, you know, you're really focusing, you're trying to see every little spot on the track. The asphalt actually looks different, you know. When the sun comes up, slowly, you start to actually see what you couldn't see for 5, 6, 7 hours of night ride, and you say, damn it, I could have went and brake 5 meters after that, 10 feet after that.
It's that magical hour in a 24-hour race. Dawn. The long Florida night is about to end. The new sun, a beacon to the finish line. Teams and drivers have labored through the night for a chance to see the checkered flag under the noonday sun. It's time for the home stretch at the Rolex 24 at Daytona. Well, you may have been treated to the only pictures we will see of the sun over Daytona International Speedway. We have heavy cloud cover, and it continues to rain lightly as we welcome you. We are 3/4 of the way through the 42nd running of the Rolex 24 at Daytona, with 6 long hours of racing still to come. I'm Bob Varsha, along with Lee Diffie, David Hobbs, Dorsey Schrader, Calvin Fish, Brian Till, and Chris Neville. Here's a look at our standings. Beginning with the Daytona prototype class, the top 4 cars are also the leaders in the overall standings. Those would be Andy Wallace, whose Daytona prototype, shared with NASCAR stars Tony Stewart and Dale Earnhardt Jr., has led for more than 12 hours now. Another NASCAR superstar, Jimmy Johnson, runs second, followed by Terry Borcheller, the defending class champion from 2003, and Wayne Taylor in his brand new Pontiac-powered Riley chassis. In the GT category, a great battle in store. Johnny Molan leads Lonnie Pechnik in a pair of Porsches by 1 lap. Philip Peter runs third in a Ferrari 360 Modena, and that battle for the third and final podium position in the GT class looks like it's going to be a great one. In the third class in competition here, Super Grand Sport, the SGS class, Mark Lieb of Germany leads over American Randy Popes and Canadian Dave Lacey in a trio of Porsches. In fact, Porsche dominated the entry for this race with 30 of the 55 cars entered. 53 cars started the race, 13 cars now officially out, so some 40 cars are still running. The attrition has been remarkably low here at the Rolex 24. There you see the number 68 Porsche from the Racers Group. That car's been parked out on the infield for some time now. Let's take you up high and join Lee Diffie and comrades.
Thanks, Bob. That's a real shame for Ian James and the entire crew with the 68 Racers Group Porsche. 5th in GT class. They have been higher than that, and they've been consistently around that top 15 mark throughout the night, even when we went off air at 9 p.m. Eastern last night. Particularly Ian James had a very strong run, and RJ Valentine. So to see that car out is a real disappointment for that team.
And unfortunately, we're looking at the good side of the car, but you can tell by the ride height of the front end right here that it's taken off the right side wheels and tires. You can see the damage around this corner right here. They're going to have to tow it back in, but I'm suspecting that there's no right rear on there at all right now.
Just here is the sister car. This is the Patrick Long, York Bergmeister, Timo Bernard, and the reigning champion Kevin Buckler. This is their car. That damage happened very, very early in this race, the damage at the rear of the car, when Kevin had a very scary blowout at 180 miles an hour along the front stretch and went flying past pit road. But the car has come back very strong. They run 10th overall and 4th in class, and they're on the same lap as Philip Peter in the Red Bull Ferrari. So a great fight going on there, and a podium is not out of reach for those guys. This guy's flying, continues to. Andy Wallace will be pitting shortly, and we will show you that when we return, but he remains a very solid 3 laps in front and could very well pick up his 4th Rolex 24 win here at Daytona today.
Welcome back live to Daytona International Speedway as we kick off another 7.5 hours of live coverage, taking you to the conclusion of an American sports car classic, the 42nd running of the Rolex 24 at Daytona. The good news is sports car races go on rain or shine. The bad news is it has been raining here at Daytona for more than 12 hours, and we are currently under a full course caution. We have been for the last 2 hours due to the sheer volume of water here at the racetrack. Here's a look at the standings. Andy Wallace with teammates Tony Stewart and Dale Earnhardt Jr. have led since early yesterday evening, helped in part by these long yellow flags. Terry Borcheller in second, Jimmy Johnson in third, and Wayne Taylor in fourth as Daytona prototypes fill the top 4 positions, covered by just 6 laps. Then Johnny Mollem in the GT class leading Porsche 911 GT3 RS, just 1 lap ahead of the second place car in class, currently handled by young Johannes van Overbeek. Then 2 more Daytona prototypes in 7th and 8th, Dieter Quester and Jörg Bergmeister in a Ferrari and a Porsche respectively on the same lap in that battle for the 3rd and final podium spot in the GT category. And not far behind, yet another GT Porsche 911. GT should be a great battle all the way to the finish. Then our SGS, or Super Grand Sport class leader, the 3rd and final class in competition here at the Rolex. Greg Pootmans of Canada driving a Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car. Then the GT car of Tony Burgess, Randy Pobst in the 2nd place SGS Porsche. Scott Dixon driving with Scott Pruitt. That's the pole-sitting Lexus Riley, a brand new car for Chip Ganassi Racing, but they've had their share of problems through the night. They currently run in 15th place, 31 laps off the lead. Then another pair of GT cars and an SGS machine as the classes continue to mix it up here at Daytona. The rain continues to fall fairly lightly now, and as you can see the flags snapping on the infield, there is a chance we could get this track dry if only it would stop raining. Temperature 63 degrees. It'll warm up a little bit. Sunrise expected at 7:14 a.m. Eastern time, but right now I'd say there's very little chance that we'll watch the sunrise over Florida. Here's a look at the current radar. Daytona Beach is at the upper right portion of the screen. The weather moving from the southwest to northeast, and from what that looks like, although I am certainly no meteorologist, I would say there's a chance that this rain might stop, and that would be a very good thing indeed. Welcome to our Speed Channel host position high above Victory Lane. I'm Bob Varsha. 7.5 hours of live coverage coming up. We'll get you up to date on what's been happening during the night. And our top story right now has to be the front-running Daytona prototype being driven by 2 NASCAR Nextel Cup stars and former Rolex winner Andy Wallace. They have been absolutely bulletproof in this, the first anniversary of the introduction of the Daytona prototype class. Now, we had a heavy downpour about 3 a.m. Eastern time that basically flooded several of the corners here at Daytona International Speedway. The yellow flag came out, and it has been out since that time. But the cars have been circulating on track, and of course,
the green flag racing. Bob?
All right, thank you, Brian. Normally at an event like this, we admire the strength and courage and speed of the racers, and their grace, as racer actor Paul Newman likes to say. He and his team have had a very difficult Rolex. Right now, we are admiring their resiliency. We'll be back to Daytona International Speedway.
So early, just a little after 6 here, East Coast time. Let's update you on the Daytona prototype class. They're reasonably spread out, but they do fill the top 4 positions overall. But this is the class standings. Andy Wallace in that Crawford with Chevrolet power behind it for Howard Boss Motorsports, going nicely indeed. Terry Borcheller in that car, in the second car, the 54 car, well placed ahead of Jimmy Johnson. And then Wayne Taylor in his debut run in his new team. Certainly not his debut run as far as 24-hour races go. This is his 24th. Mark Goosens, this team has had somewhat of a comeback. Although they're 14 laps down, they are in 7th overall and 5th in class. That's a mighty effort for the Doran Lister organization. And Kelly Collins has just taken over from Court Wagner in the Michael Shank Racing Lexus Doran. Dixon is back in the Ganassi car. They run 7th in class, and some troubles throughout the night puts them some 30 laps down. The reigning SRP2 champion in the BMW Piccio for G&W Motorsports, Steve Marshall, 8th in class. Sadly, Shane Lewis and that car there, the Southern Motorsports BMW Fab car, they were right up there on the verge of breaking into the top 10 around about the 14th hour mark. And they have dropped back, and it's been a tough old day, as you can see there, for Robbie Gordon and Doug Goad and Stefan Gregoire.
Nightmare out there. Now, under caution, these cars really almost turn into a sauna. You're not getting any air over the car. The inside cockpit temperature remains the same, and it just mists up the inside of the windshield. A lot of the teams have been doing windshield changes throughout the night, particularly under caution, trying to find a solution to this major problem. They've been drilling holes in, they've been putting defog, maybe windshield wiper fluid on the screen, just trying to do anything to get that screen clean for these drivers. Now, when we do go back to green, the next issue is going to be tires. A lot of wet weather tires were used throughout the day thus far, and a lot of these tire suppliers, remember we have 3 tire suppliers in this division. We have the Goodyear for the DPs, Dunlops for the GT class, and the Hoosier tire for the SGS. We understand that 2 of the suppliers may be running into a supply issue. What they were hoping for was a little bit more attrition through this race, where some of the teams could then hand their tires off to some of the other teams. The problem is, running under caution, the cars keep running, so it's a double-edged sword. When we go back to green flag racing, the teams are going to need more wet tires, but until some of them other teams drop out, it's not going to happen. Brian, what's the story down at your end of pit lane?
Well, Calvin, it's abysmal. You know, Mother Nature, when she's not happy, she can be a real... You get the idea anyway, and that's what it is down here. You know these cars run in the rain, and they've got rain tires, and I want to try to give you an idea why they're under caution right now. You can see on the cameras at home, you can see water on the racetrack, but back here behind pit lane, you can see how deep the water really is. Even though these rain tires have big grooves in them, when they roll through the water, they push it off to the side out of the channels of the rain tires, but there's so much water on the racetrack right now, even though the rain tires do their job and push the water away, there's no place for the water to go, and it leaves this standing water. The car's hydroplane. The only safe thing to do is keep them behind the pace car and keep the pace down. Hopefully, the rain subsides, the water will drain from the track, and then go back.
The clock continues to tick toward the end of this 24-hour race. I suppose the good news is we may have history in store here at Daytona. The shortest distance covered by a race winner in Rolex 24 history came in 1989, 621 laps, about 2,210 miles by Derek Bell, John Andretti, and the late Bob Wallach in a Porsche 962. We have now completed 416 laps, so a little over 200 laps to get to the record. It's hard to say what the weather's going to do, but we'll be following it. And now let's go up high to our announced position above start-finish to hear from Lee Diffie and Dorsey Schrader.
Good morning, Bob. Good morning, everyone. Well, I guess it's not the way that we would have liked to have woken up, and first thing you think of is who was out in front and what's been happening while we've been catching a quick nap. But I guess we have to focus on the positive, Dorsey, and we had one heck of a race last night, yesterday afternoon and last night, and this thing is far from over.
That's for sure. These guys want this rain to end because there's actually 3 laps between first and third place in the prototype. But all the way through the field, there's racing to be had. But they can't do it because they're behind this pace car. These guys want to get it on and get it on right now.
Well, it's 6:05 local time, 3 hours they've been under caution. And Mark Raffoff, we were speaking with him earlier, and we'll speak with him shortly again. They're hoping to get back to racing as soon as they can if the rain will just ease up a little. Let's get in our first pit report of the day. Here's Calvin Fish.
Well, Lee, visibility has really plagued these drives and teams since it started to rain here yesterday. One of the major issues was the windshield wiper, getting it to actually touch the screen at speed, and probably the worst affected by that were the Fab car cars. Really out there, a lot of the teams just struggling to see anything. A lot of drivers coming in and just saying it is an absolute